And to see these pieces in context with his work really shows you the vastness of where he took his inspiration from.
My name is Melinda Kerstein. I'm the installation specialist for the Department of Costume and Textiles, and my role within this exhibition was to mount the costume and dress the objects. I think McQueen has really been a focus of mine since I was going to undergrad and grad school during the 90s. I was really captivated by his work and found myself really closely following his career, and with all of his shows really trying to decode all of the things that he was trying to execute, or actually getting to the crux of his inspirations, because many designers before him had used historicism, but his work went far beyond that, incorporating different types of art, film, references to pop culture, and that really inspired me throughout my career. The process of mounting this costume exhibition began after the curators came up with their initial checklist. It really starts at the beginning, listening to the curators, what their goals are for these pieces, the themes they're trying to address surrounding the pieces, the groupings of them together really informs how we're going to mount the costumes. Part of our job is to help the curators achieve their goals and tell the narrative. The process starts with the initial try-on of the garments, seeing how they fit on a mannequin or a dress form, seeing if they need a body reference to best display the aesthetics of the piece, but also looking at what the curators are trying to isolate. For example, if they're trying to isolate the look of the tailoring, we might pick a dress form as opposed to a mannequin, make the viewer focus in on those particular details. And once we start trying on the objects on the mannequins, we really get a good idea of what initially we thought might look great on one type of mount. We decide to change it because it really isn't what's best for that particular piece. And for this particular show, because of the addition of art from different departments, that really informed the way certain pieces would be displayed. For example, the coat from Angels and Demons that is at the beginning of the exhibition, it's a coat unto itself. The tailoring of that coat is amazing, but also it needed to reference the seraphims that were going to be shown with it. So we decided on an invisible mount, which is a mount that is made of a very thick felt that the pattern is taken from the inside of the coat, or we pad out a dress form and then take a pattern, a draped pattern off of that dress form. So it fits perfectly with that object. And that object is shown without the distraction of a mannequin face or the dress form. It looks like it's floating. And that staid quality of that piece really reflected the fragments of the seraphim that are being shown next to it. So that visual cue is really solidified. I think the installation specialists and dressers' roles in mounting costume exhibitions is essential to the success of exhibition as a whole, because it is our job to visually translate the curator's vision for the show into the objects itself. To make those narrative connections, especially in the show, between the costume objects and the other objects, and really pinpointing the details that are important within their narrative. A lot of his work, we wanted to show a kinetic movement to the objects. And it was hard to achieve that in an exhibition like this. And, you know, this movement that was so much a part of his runway shows and the dramatics of them we really wanted to incorporate, especially into the deliverance section of this exhibition. So we decided to look at 3D printing. And this correlated also not just to McQueen's incorporation of movement and, drama in his exhibitions, but also to his use of new technology. We wanted to embrace that and embrace the theme of that and bring it into our mounting process. So with this notion of the Depression era dance marathon, looking at the exhaustion and just the poses really helped animate this section. The designer basically took the measurements that I gave him for the garments, took these images that the curators picked, and we incorporated kind of looking at the object safety, looking how, the object would still be supported on the mannequin, incorporating these poses into a moment from this runway show and giving it the kinetic energy that is often missing in a costume exhibition. And this was quite a long process. It went from basic drawings to a computerized animation, and then finally through the manufacturing process. And it really, I cannot imagine this section now without these mannequins. It just really it puts you in the moment of this place and time where this fashion show took place. My favorite piece in the show, it is displayed on an invisible mount, and there is something very ghostly about it, and there's something that's has a darkness and a lightness at the same time. It's very dramatic, but it also has a very personal meaning to me because this was the mount that I was making really during the height of the pandemic, and I really connected to it. It was a piece that it gave me focus during a very hard time. To be able to work with something with such beauty really made a huge impact on me during the pandemic. And the mount itself was very complicated. It made the reverse engineering of the invisible mounts very difficult to create the right shape. And also because on the runway show, it had this ethereal quality on the model while she was moving, and to capture that within an invisible mount, it was very challenging, but I think the end product was very successful. One aspect of dressing that people may not see because you're not meant to see it is all of the work that goes underneath the costume. So there's layers of batting that go under there, and we're basically sculpting the body underneath. So even if the mannequin itself is a certain size, we're transforming that mannequin underneath to the shape of the body. And also not just the shape of the body, sometimes we're also shaping the look itself. For example, all of these pieces are ready to wear. So what is manufactured may not be exactly what you see on the runway. And a perfect example of this is the dress from Sarabande, in which when we put it on the mannequin, it just hung. But when you look at it on the runway, it has these very extreme hips that reference panniers from the 18th century, but with a little bit of a softer look to them. So we wanted to represent this dress, how it would look on the runway. So underneath, we did create that understructure using padding and other elements on top of the mannequin to create that very particular body shape. Working with Michael Schmidt was actually a really wonderful creative process to witness, and the collaboration really came with looking at the mount types being used and also incorporating 3D technology into his designs as well. Because we were already using 3D printing for our mannequins in Deliverance, he decided to use that same technology with Plato's Atlantis. And it was really fascinating to be part of the process of watching Michael's original drawings to the end product of these really amazing headdresses that were incorporated into the mannequin and into the head design of these mannequins. You see these wonderful snakes coming out of the head, or the octopus. And when we got those in-house, they were simple 3D prints, and Michael took them and just took them to the next level, one using paints that were derived from makeup and the other using surface treatments. And it really makes a huge impact on that section of the show and really translates to another level what McQueen's theme in Plato's Atlantis was.
My name is Michael Schmidt. I am a clothing and jewelry designer. I work primarily in the entertainment industry, and we were delightfully asked to create the headpieces that accompany the McQueen pieces that you see in the exhibition. The thing that I found so inspirational about Lee McQueen, who was a friend of mine, was his willingness to subvert the industry that he loved so much. By doing this, he knew that in order to effect change, he couldn't confront the industry head on. He needed to assimilate into it, infiltrate its ranks, if you will, and detonate it from the inside. In doing so, he learned all of the great techniques of Savile Row tailoring and haute couture, mastery. And then he took these techniques and he created entirely new silhouettes, things that had not been seen before, things that were always startling, sometimes shocking. And in doing so, he created an entirely new language that was unique to him and him alone. And I think this is what I admired the most about Lee. In creating these headpieces, these sculptural works, it was always my intention to enhance, but never to attempt to overwhelm the pieces on display. It was very much my concern that this be about Lee McQueen. I simply wanted to continue the storytelling with which he created his collections. And so I would take inspiration from the backstory behind each collection, but also the materiality of the pieces themselves, and try to continue the narrative which he tried to lay out. And so there was never any shortage of inspiration. Of course, it was a magical playground in which to work, and his ideas were so forthcoming and so readily apparent that it wasn't difficult to come up with the ideas behind these pieces, but we really tried to stretch ourselves in ways that brought about new revelations for myself in my creativity and expression, and I'm hoping that we managed to achieve something that complemented the works. In my work, we utilize a lot of materials that are not typically associated with the body. We do a good deal of 3D printing, a lot of metalwork, plastics, and these sorts of things. And so these things are very familiar to us in my work, but I wanted to go beyond that and explore new techniques. And for example, there was a piece that was woven wood that created an antler-like structure that helped tell the story of the girl who lived in a tree. And so it continued the narrative that McQueen was trying to say, but also explored new techniques for us and new abilities and new, it was a fun process to learn on the go. And even in his work, Lee is constantly surprising me and inspiring me to try new things and create new silhouettes and again, hopefully tell a story. One of my favorite of his collections was Plato's Atlantis, which was sadly his final collection, but it's one of the most astonishing and perhaps the most modern. And it tells this tale of these exotic, beautiful creatures that have evolved, as we all have, from the sea. And as I was trying to conjure up some sort of ideas for these treatments, it occurred to me that a female that lived in the sea would embellish herself with things that were found there. And sadly, these are, in our day and age, the detritus of our society. You know, plastic soda pop can rings, or plastic wrappers, or you know, all of the old forgotten materials from our society that have been swept into the ocean. And so I try to take some of these materials and turn them into something beautiful, still using the silhouettes that he created in his collection, because the silhouettes at the time were so shocking and so exciting. You know, these hairstyles and the amazing armadillo shoes, and we try to treat those in a way that was respectful of his goals for the collection, but through unusual materialities. In addition, for the Plato's Atlantis section, we also did quite a bit of 3D printing, which I have some familiarity with and use quite a bit in my work. And we were able to create some silhouettes, again, that were reminiscent of creatures that were sort of quasi-nautical and human, and yet still stunningly beautiful. So for me, that portion of the collection was great fun to do, and challenging, and again helped tell a narrative that's, you know, that I found quite inspiring. In choosing the materials for each of the pieces, I tried to stay within, again, the languaging that McQueen used. You know, we did a lot of beading, a lot of leather, a lot of crystal. These were all important to Lee, and I wanted to be respectful of his vocabulary. And so we would take these materials and try to use them in a sort of innovative way. But again, it was important for me to stay within his lane, you know, to really not veer too far out from the materials that he used. One of the most interesting aspects of this exhibition is seeing these marvelous works, historical pieces that were very much inspirational to Lee and to myself, and to see these pieces in context with his work really shows you the vastness of where he took his inspiration from. You know, sculptural works, paintings, great art, great photography, great, you know, all of these things. And, you know, inspiration is a funny thing. You never know when it's going to strike, and you have to be open to everything, and he certainly was. And in seeing these works in juxtaposition with the clothing, hopefully that will inspire others to be inspired, to look to our past, to hold hands with the past, and while we embrace the future.